Hey, it's HIlmon Sorey from Closed Loop, here to talk about cold calling, everybody's favorite topic. You know, whenever I mention cold calling, it's interesting because the whole room lights up. Everybody gets really giddy and excited because they know that here, right now, is the gold. Yeah, no, that never actually happens. Most people are like, oh God, cold calling, they get into cold sweats. When I tell a client, you know, your team's got to make some cold calls. They're like, hey, but we send emails. Oh, but we got LinkedIn. All these other options. Here's the deal. Cold calling is not difficult, but you know what's going to happen? You're not going to reach half the people you try to reach out to. You're also going to end up leaving a ton of voicemails. You're also going to end up with folks who catch you on the phone and aren't really excited to hear from you. So can we just get over that out of the gate? Let's get over it. I'll give you a second. Good? All right. Here we go. Here's what cold calling is good for. It's great for testing your messages. It's a great means of reaching a ton of people really quickly. You know how many cold calls you can make in a day? That's a lot of folks. Imagine leaving voicemails in all those people's voicemail boxes. You get your message out there. It's also a great way to build your sales chops. You toughen up a little bit. You learn how to get your messages out quickly. You also learn a little bit about acting. So here's an important point before we get into the mechanics. I have never seen a client fail at cold calling. I've only seen them fail to make the calls, okay? So cold calling is all about activity and, here's an interesting one, acting. Let's talk about that a little bit. So here's the deal. A lot of cold calling clinics and a lot of folks who, get paid a lot of money to go stand in front of a room and talk to you about cold calling but aren't making that many cold calls themselves will say things like this. The first thing you got to do is get the person on the phone, smile as you're talking to the phone, and tell them, the reason for my call is X. You know what? They don't care. Nobody cares about the reason for your call. Yeah, you did some research. Fantastic. Everybody's doing a whole bunch of research. Yeah, you're working with their competition. Never heard that line before. One of the biggest keys with cold calling is that you have to interrupt their pattern. And you have to own the fact that that's what you're doing. So you can't sound like every other salesperson who's calling going, hey, this is HIlmon Sorey from Closed Loop, and I was just hoping to get a minute of your time so that I can tell you the reason for my call because I'm working with a number of your competitors. Who cares? They're hearing it 1,000 times over. So what we're going to tell you right now is a little bit of an interruption to that, but here's the biggest takeaway for you. I want you to realize that regardless of what we're saying right here, the psychology is you do not want to sound like everybody else who's making cold calls, or you know what? You get treated like a salesperson. So let's find ways to interrupt that pattern while still being honest. We can't lie about why we're making this call and letting people know what to expect and what the outcomes should be. First things first, you got to realize that you're interrupting someone's day, right? The person isn't sitting there waiting all day long, typing while they're working on email, going, gosh, I really wish somebody would call me and try to sell me some product that prior to just a moment ago, I never had any interest in whatsoever, and maybe try to convince me to take a meeting or look at a different, gosh, hopefully I'll get that call today. Nobody's doing that, right? That's completely preposterous. Instead, they're working. They're in the middle of their workflow, and you're interrupting their day. So, buying is an emotional process that we justify with logic. The key here is to understand that the way that you're going to be able to have the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody isn't by earning the right, by telling them you've done some research and that you know what their company's up to. That's not nearly as important as being able to reflect to them the pain that they might be experiencing that either they're aware of or that you're making them aware of, and getting them to engage in a conversation with you, or at least have the willingness to hear out the types of folks that you've worked with and the problems that you potentially solve. So keep in mind, pain is the most compelling emotion. This is the thing that we're looking for, right? We're not trying to sell somebody on the opportunity to do something. We're not trying to sell somebody on the reward. We're not trying to say, hey, we're making tons of money for other people. We're saying, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, we're working with people who have been frustrated by something. Is this happening to you as well? We're going to get into what that actually sounds like in just a second. I want to pause for a minute here because there are two really important keys that you got to understand if you're going to make cold calls. So, the keys are this. First is, there's this thing called scale. Scale is the means by which we decide whether or not we're going to engage with people, just as human beings. This isn't prospect or buyer or salesperson or anything like that. This is me and you as human beings who have respiratory and limbic systems. We all operate the exact same way. And there are 5 essential drivers that decide whether or not we're going to engage with somebody, whether it's in person, whether it's on the phone, whether it's over video, whether it's in a grocery store, doesn't matter. Here are the 5 drivers. It's called scale. S-C-A-L-E. In no particular order, those drivers are called SCALE as an acronym to help us remember, right? So the first S, it stands for status. Status basically means how you see yourself as compared to your peers. So it's really important in a cold call that we're preserving a person's sense of status as we ask them questions about their company. So keep that in mind as we keep going forward. Certainty. People want to know what's going to happen next. Have you ever had somebody cold call you? If you hadn't, it's really nerve-wracking because someone's on the other end of the phone, you don't know why they're calling, you haven't heard of the company that they're calling from, and you don't know where this conversation is going. So what we're going to do as we build this is definitely talk about what we're doing at the top of the phone call so that people have some certainty around where this thing is going. Third, we've got the A, which stands for autonomy. Autonomy basically means, do you have the right to choose? One of the reasons people hate cold calls and they're so awkward is because you're calling, you're taking all of someone's time, and then you're coming back and saying, here's a decision I'd like you to make at the end. We're going to move that decision all the way to the top of the conversation so that they can opt in and feel as though they've got a choice instead of brushing you off midway through the call. Likeness, that's the L. Likeness is essential because people want to talk to you if they feel that other people like them have had a conversation with you as well. So let's make sure we talk about things that are relevant to the person that we're calling. And then finally is the E, which stands for equity. Equity is all about fairness. Are you being fair? Are you being fair with the person's time? Are you being fair with the things that you're wanting to talk about and the reason that you've called? Is there fairness in the equation? If any of these 5 drivers are not being maximized, then the challenge you get is that you're going to be dealing with somebody who is just trying to get off the phone with you. You're going to face rejection. You're going to have people wondering what's going to happen next, and they're going to want to opt out of this conversation. The second piece that's really important for you is to understand that there's this concept of reactance. Here's an example. I went out fairly recently to buy a pretty large screen TV, right? When I walked into the electronics store, what do you think happened? Salesperson comes up to me, right? And they say, hi, welcome to the store. Is there something that I can help you with? What do you think my response was? Exactly right. No thanks, I'm just looking. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Who got this programming? The reason we do it is this thing called reactance. We do not like feeling boxed in or feeling as though we don't have the autonomy to make our own choices. And we know that that salesperson who's walked up and asked, is there something that I can help you with, is only going to try to separate me from my money. So I'm going to put them at some distance. Here's how this relates to cold calling. When you call somebody cold and you sound like a salesperson, everybody basically does this. Figuratively or even literally. They're like, yeah, what is it? What do you want? Nope, I don't want any. It's just an immediate response to you interrupting their day and wanting to try to get them to do something that they had not opted into. So we have to figure out a way to deal with reactance. Okay, so that's it.